Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to be telling you how to get sub X at Pyraminx. Now, what this means is that for every milestone of Pyraminx, from sub 30 all the way down to sub 3, I'm going to be telling you how to get there. So what I'm going to be doing is telling you what you should be learning, focusing on, or implementing into your solve at each stage of your Pyraminx improvement. Now, I don't really recommend watching this video all the way through at once, as there is just too much information for you to focus on. I think the best way is to watch the parts that are relevant to the times you're getting, and then as you improve, you can come back and then more parts will be relevant to you. Finally, anything you need to learn, like methods and algorithms, will be in the description. So first off, we have how to get sub 30. Now, getting sub 30 on Pyraminx is pretty easy. All you need to do is learn how to solve it and then practice a bit. So the method that I think you should learn is called layer by layer. And in this method, you get 3 centers around a side, and then you insert the 3 edges on that layer. And then you've got a completed layer and only these 3 edges to do. And there are 5 ways it can be, and you'll learn an algorithm for each of the cases. Now, this method is a really good one to learn because it's pretty easy to learn because there's only 5 algorithms, and you can get really fast with it. And also, it helps you to be able to easily transition into L4E, which is the method that we're going to be talking about later on in the video. So next up, we have how to get sub 20 at Pyraminx. Now, sub 20 isn't a really difficult barrier to pass, and you don't really have to learn anything else or do anything kind of different from what you're doing right now to become sub 20. If you just keep on practicing and keep on getting better with layer by layer, then you will get sub 20 eventually. So instead of giving you something new to focus on or something new to learn, I'm going to give you a couple of things that you might want to think about at this stage. The first thing is being color neutral. So here, imagine if we get this scramble in inspection, right? We get this scramble. So green has 3 centers already done. So green is the best side that you should be doing in this scramble. But some people, they only limit themselves to one side. So they may only ever do yellow. So they're instead going to do yellow, which isn't as easy. You don't want to be like that, okay? You have to be color neutral to get good at Pyraminx. So in inspection, start looking at all of the sides and seeing which one is the best side for you to do, and then do that side. Being color neutral is a must to get good at Pyraminx. You have to be color neutral. So if you're not already choosing which side to do based on how easy it is, if you're limiting yourself to only 1 or 2 sides, make sure to become color neutral now, otherwise it'll be harder later on. The second thing that you can start to think about is which Pyraminx you're using. So choosing a Pyraminx can be hard because there are a lot of decent options, and because Pyraminx hardware has always been pretty bad and there hasn't been a lot of progress, things like the Bell V1 are still pretty good options. So which Pyraminx should you get? Well, the best option, in my opinion, is this, Stevens Usian Little Magic Pyraminx. Now, this is the Pyraminx that most of the top cubers use, and it's really good. So Usian Little Magic Pyraminx is a really good option, especially if you can get the Stevens version from the Cubicle, but often it is out of stock, so often you can't. So if you can't do that and are just starting out, I do think the Bell V1 is a really good option because it's very solid, and it fits a lot of turning styles. But if you kind of know what you like, then you can kind of look into the Bell V2 and the GAN Pyraminx. GAN Pyraminx is a bit more expensive, and the Bell V2, a lot of people don't like it, but a lot of people really do like it. So it could work or really not work for you. But if you really don't know which Pyraminx you should get, then the Usian Little Magic or the Bell V1, ideally the Usian Little Magic, is what you should be getting. And Pyraminx hardware is quite important. It's more important than, say, 3x3 hardware is for 3x3. So it's important to get a Pyraminx that really works for you. So it's a good idea to kind of do some research into Pyraminx and kind of see which one is best for you. So next up we have sub 15. And for sub 15, I think there are two things that can really help to get you to this time barrier. So the first thing is inserting pieces into the bottom layer differently. So let's have a look at this case, right? We're doing the red side, and we're going to insert this red and green piece into here. Now, what you may have been doing, which is what most tutorials teach, is to see this red and green, and we're going to move it in here. So we're going to move it to the front. The red is on the right, so we're going to insert it like that, right? But what you might have noticed is it was at the back, and then we've done this move, but then we've just done that move backwards, right? So we've just done kind of two useless moves there. So what we can instead do is, if this red is at the back, we can insert it like this, right? And alternatively, if it's at the back but on the left, we can insert it like that, okay? The other case that we can do is something like this, right? So what we might be doing is we're doing this yellow and red piece, and we're moving it like that, and then we're moving it like that, and then we're inserting it like that, right? But what we can instead do is, because it's on the side, is insert it like that. And alternatively, if it's on the right, then we're going to, move the opposite layer up and put it in like that. So what I think a good way to do this is to, let's for example we see this yellow and red piece. So we're not going to move the top layer at all for now, right? Instead, we're going to rotate to where we want to insert it into, right? And then, no matter where the red sticker is, we can insert it in that way, right? So before, we would have to move it like that, and then away. But now, we're just going to rotate to the side we want to insert it, and no matter where the red sticker is, we just insert it using that algorithm, right? So this can be really helpful because it drops the amount of moves you're doing, because you're not doing any random moves that are kind of useless. So that is the first thing I think you should be doing. The second thing that can help you to get sub 15 is to preserve pieces that are already made while you make your 3 centers for the first layer. So let's have a look at this example. This yellow and red piece is already connected up to the center. So let's say we were going to do yellow, right? So we can insert the pieces, but if we insert this piece, then that moves that piece out. It hasn't preserved it. So what we can instead do is move these 2 centers first, and then move this center down. And what that does is preserves this piece, so that when you start inserting pieces, you have one less piece to do, which is obviously faster. Now, I've got a few examples to show you, but basically, you want to, if you see a piece is already made in inspection, you want to preserve that. So let's have a look at this example. Here, we have this piece already made, but we can't just insert the centers in an order that preserves it, because this is the only center that needs to be made, and, well, that breaks it up. So, what we can instead do is move this center down, like that, and then we preserve it. So doing little things like this can really help you. Let's look at a different example. Here, we actually have 2 pieces that are already made, right? And this is a case that you might come across sometimes. So we're going to do the green side. So what we can do is move this side up, right? Because that doesn't break any of the green pieces up. But then, if we move this, well, that breaks this green piece up. It doesn't affect this one, but it has affected that one. So what we can do is move this all out the way, then move this center in, and then move that, right? And I've got one last example. This can be an annoying case. So we've got these 2 green pieces that are already made, but this center is not made. And if we try and move that in, well, that doesn't work, right? We can preserve one of the centers pretty easily, by moving it down like that, right? But it doesn't preserve both of them. So what we can do is we can move them both down, then move this center in, and then move them both up. And that can preserve it. So to get sub 15, if in inspection you see a piece that is already made, try and make sure that that doesn't get broken up while you make your 3 centers. So next up we have how to get sub 10. And the first thing I think we should be thinking about is what to do if there are no pieces to preserve when we look at inspection. So I'm looking around this Pyraminx and there's no pieces that are already correct. So what can we do? Well, we can have a look around and see if there are any pieces that can be made with one move. And we can make a piece with one move, this red and yellow, and we can move that in. So if we were doing the yellow side, instead of just moving the center in, we can make this piece in one move and then move that in. So it does use one extra move, but it also means that an edge is now correct, which is definitely worth it. So let's have a look at a different example. Here, again, there is no pieces that are correct, right? But we can make this blue and green in one move by moving it there, right? So let's say we were doing blue. Instead of just moving the 2 centers in, we can move this piece over first. Then we can use our preserving rules, right? Because we can't just move this center in and then that one, because that breaks it up, right? We have to move this center in first and then that one. And then what that means is, again, for one extra move, you have one blue piece in the layer correct. This one obviously isn't because it's not in the right place. So this can be really helpful. So if you don't see any pieces that are already correct in inspection, then what you can do is have a look around and see if there are any pieces that can be made in one move. Now, sometimes there won't be, but if there are, then it's a good idea to make those pieces correct and then put them in the layer. The second thing that I think can help you get sub 10 is inserting pieces into the back. So let's have a look at this example. So here we are doing the blue side, and we've got this blue and green piece at the back here. So we're just going to insert it like this, right? So now we've just inserted this piece and we've got the green side facing us. And then this red and blue piece needs to go here, right? So what we could do is rotate and then, move that side up and do that, right? But what we can instead do is that, and that's inserted it into the back. So inserting a piece into the back can be really helpful sometimes because it means you don't have to rotate the Pyraminx, which can take quite a while. Sometimes it can't work. So let's say in this case, again, we're doing blue and we've just inserted this piece. So here, to insert this blue piece into there, we'd have to move this back side up first. So we have to do a B move, which is kind of awkward, and it's easier to just rotate and do that. But obviously, if the blue piece was here instead, then we can insert it into the back like that. So when you're inserting your 3 edges into the bottom layer, just try and think about whether you can insert it into the back and whether that will be faster. And that can be good to do sometimes. So next up, we have how to get sub 8. Now for sub 8, I don't think you have to learn L4E. I think we can carry on with the layer by layer improvement. But I do think that you should learn a subset of L4E. And the subset you should learn is the subset where you have a piece in the top that's solved. So let's have a look at these 2 cases, right? Now, for this case, if you insert it the way you normally would, you get a last layer skip, which is what we want, right? But for this case, if we insert it the way we normally would, we don't get a last layer skip. Instead, we can insert it like this, and that skips last layer. So what I think you should do is go and learn all of the cases for L4E where there's a piece in the top that's solved. And that means that if you get to the stage where you're inserting your last edge piece, and you see that there's a piece in the top that's solved, you can always skip last layer. So you've learned how to get some easy last layer skips, but you're probably noticing that they don't come up very often. But there is a way to make them come up more often, and that is preserving a solved piece in the top. So let's have a look at this. So we're doing red, and we have just done our centers and are now inserting the pieces. But we can notice that this piece is solved. So we're going to insert this green piece. And if we insert it the normal way, we're going to break up this piece, right? Like that, which is not what we want. So instead, we can insert this green piece like that, and that preserves your solved piece in the top. Next up, we have the blue piece. And again, we can insert this the normal way, right? And that doesn't break up the solved piece in the top, so it's good. And then we get to our last piece, and because we've preserved the solved piece in the top, we can force a last layer skip. So if you're doing a solve and you see a solved piece in the top, try and preserve it. Another thing that can help you to get sub 8 is to do the tips in a better way. Now, there are two main methods that the top Pyraminxes use to do their tips. The first method is to do all of the tips at the start. So the way this one works is that I'm going to do this tip with my left hand, I'm going to do this back tip with my middle finger, this with my index finger, and then this right one with my thumb here, right? So as I pick the Pyraminx up, I'm going to do all the tips just like that, right? Now, the second way to do tips is to do them throughout the solve. So let's say I'm doing this solve, and what I'm going to do is I might do these two tips at the start. I'll do a couple of moves. I'm going to move this side down now, so I'll kind of do this tip and move that down. And then I might have like one tip to do at the end. And then I've kind of done the tips throughout the solve. So both methods are perfectly acceptable. Both methods have gotten sub 2 averages in competition. So just try both of them and pick which one is best for you, and then practice it and get really good at it. And then your tips will be really fast. So next up, we have how to get sub 6. Now, to get sub 6, I think you should learn L4E. So L4E is a more advanced version of layer by layer. So what we have is we have a V, right? We have a layer, but without one of the pieces. Now in layer by layer, we would just insert this piece and do last layer, right? But in L4E, you learn a load of algorithms so that you can do the last 4 edges in one algorithm rather than 2 steps. So to get sub 6, I think you should learn this method and then practice it to get sub 6. Now, the switch to L4E can be a bit difficult because recognizing the cases is quite hard. So just after you switch, you will probably be slower with L4E than you were with layer by layer because you're not used to the method. But just stick with it, keep practicing with L4E, and eventually you will be much faster with L4E than you ever could be with layer by layer. I'd love to be able to give some tips about how to recognize the L4E cases faster, but honestly, it's just a thing that comes with time. If you practice L4E enough, you'll get really good at recognition. You just need to put in that time. So next up, we have how to get sub 5. And a thing that can help you to get sub 5 is to make more efficient Vs. Now, this is a pretty difficult thing to teach because there are so many different ways and tricks you can use to make efficient Vs. And the best way to get better at making Vs is to do things like unlimited inspection solves or doing the same scramble multiple times. Things where you can get really creative and try out different solutions to see what the best way to make a V is, right? But there are a couple of tricks that I can show you that are pretty easy to teach, right? So the first thing is that sometimes you'll get a case like this, where you do have 3 centers in place, but there's no obvious way to make a V, there's no easy block building. And same here, right? we've got the three centers in place, but there's nothing really easy or obvious that we can be like, yeah, well, that'll make an easy V. What we can look for is pieces in this solved layer, right? So we've got the three centers, and also we have this yellow piece in the kind of yellow side, and we also have this yellow piece in the yellow side. Now in this case, we have this yellow and red that needs to go over here, and this yellow and green which needs to go over here, which means they need to swap places, right? Which is not what we want. We want a case like this, where we have this yellow and green which needs to go down here, and this yellow and red which needs to go over here. And this is a 3 cycle, so we can do a 3 cycle, which cycles these 3 pieces around, and because the centers were already done, and we've cycled these 3 pieces around, these 2 pieces are now in place, and we have a completed V that only took us 4 moves. So if you have a case where you've got 3 centers in place already, but there's nothing else, try and have a look if you can do a 3 cycle to solve the V. Another thing that can be useful is to try and make a V with a flipped edge piece that's as part of the layer, right? So here, we can make the green V in 2 moves, like that, right? But instead, we could do this move, and then move this piece in as well, and that's a flipped edge piece, right? And then we move that. Now, obviously this isn't solved, but what it does mean is that it's narrowed down the amount of L4E cases we can have, and this improves recognition a lot. So if you haven't already solved edge piece that is kind of flipped, or you can do it in 1 move, it can sometimes be a good idea to do that because it means your recognition time will be a lot lower. The last thing I'm going to say here is don't be afraid to sometimes just insert pieces. So here we have 3 yellow centers already done and a flipped edge piece, okay? So here we can just insert this green piece into the back and this red piece there. And that's pretty fast, and because of the flipped edge piece, recognition will be pretty fast. So this is going to be a pretty fast solve. So if there is actually nothing good, no block building that you can do, don't be afraid to just insert the pieces. Another thing that can help you to get sub 5 is to focus on your finger tricks. So the main finger tricks that you use in Pyraminx are for the U layer, because for the front 2 sides at the bottom, the left and right sides, you're just wrist turning. So for the U layer, there are many ways you can move it. You can flick from the back, like this, you can kind of pull. You can push from the front, from like the sides, like that. And you can also pull from the front. And this is the hardest one to get down, but it can be really useful once you are able to do this, because in cases like this, when you're moving a side up and then doing a U move in the opposite direction, it's really good to pull instead of like moving that side up and then pulling from the back. So for this case, you want to be pulling with your right hand, like that. Another thing you can try and start doing is B moves. Now doing B moves on the Pyraminx is pretty difficult. The easiest way to do it is just like with a wrist turn like that, but that's really slow and is not worth it. So what you want to try and do is do it with your fingers kind of by flicking. Right, so there are a few ways to do this. The first is to do like I'm doing now and kind of flicking and pushing down like that. Another way you can do it is push from the top like this. And also some people do it like this where they're kind of pulling from the bottom. So have a go, see which one you like the most. Maybe for different situations you'll use a different way of doing it. But doing B moves can be really useful as part of making your V because it means you can do less rotations in your solve. So next up, we have how to get sub 4, and we're back on voiceover now because I don't have anything else that I need to use a Pyraminx to show you. So to get sub 4, the first thing you need to do is to get your Vs really good. If you want to be sub 4, you need to be really good at making Vs. At this stage, I think it's a good idea to use the CS Timer Solvers tool to help you make better Vs. CS Timer generates the optimal V solutions for every scramble if you use the Solvers tool, and this can be really useful to show you how to make better Vs. So do a scramble, find a solution, and then look on the CS Timer tool to see if it was good. For 5 and 6 move Vs, don't worry too much if you didn't do the optimal solution. often there is a solution that uses more moves but is faster to execute. However, if there is a V solution that uses 4 moves or less, you should probably be finding that. And if you can't, keep doing this practice until you can. You will learn a lot by looking at the CS timer solutions. The other thing that can help you to get sub 4 is doing more in inspection. The first thing you want to do is make sure that you always plan your whole V in inspection, even for the very hard scrambles. Your solves should have only one pause in them, the pause for the L4E recognition. You don't want to be pausing while you make your V. Another thing that you can start doing in inspection is one-looking easy solves. For this, you can use the solvers function in CS Timer again. To practice one-looking at this stage, skip scrambles until you get a scramble with a 1 or 2 move optimal V. Then try to one-look that solve, so that there are no pauses in your solve, as you just go straight into the L4E case. Once you get really good at this, you can also try one-looking 3 move Vs. Okay, so finally, we have how to get sub 3. Now, you already have a lot of the tools that you need to be sub 3. At this stage, your V solution should be good enough to get sub 3, and you know L4E. So really, you just need to turn faster to get sub 3. Well, and one other thing. The main thing that is going to get you sub 3 is one-looking a higher percentage of your solves. So how can you learn to one-look more of your solves? Well, there are many ways. Firstly, you can continue using the solvers function of CS Timer. If you get good at one-looking 3 move Vs, go on to 4 move Vs. But eventually this becomes a bit obsolete, as the optimal solutions are not always the ones you should do. So move on and do unlimited inspection solves, and try to one-look as many solves as you can. But you'll notice that there are a lot of solutions that you just can't one-look. And for this, it's time to make use of another CS Timer feature. So if there is a set of moves that you want to be able to one-look but can't, set the scramble setting to L4E, turn off draw scramble, do the scramble without looking at the Pyraminx, then do the reverse of the moves that you want to be able to one-look. Then you can look at the cube and try to one-look it. This way, you can focus on one-looking sets of moves that you struggle to do so, or ones that seem to come up a lot in your solutions. Okay, so here's an example of this in action, right? So we're going to do the red side, and what we're going to do is insert this red piece into the back here, and then this red piece into the back here, which is quite a nice solution. We're just doing that, and it's rotationless and all that. But what if I can't one-look it? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to get on the L4E scramble setting. We're going to turn this off so that we can't see what the scramble is. And obviously I'm going to show the cube now, but you don't look at the cube while you do this. So I'm going to do the scramble. And then what I'm going to do is the reverse of the moves that I want to one-look. So we're going to do the reverse. So now we look at the cube, and as you can see, we need to put this piece in the back, and then that piece in the back, right? So then we can have a look, and we can see, and then we try and one-look it, and then we can just do this over and over again with the same set of moves until we get really good at one-looking that set of moves. And then obviously if we do that loads and loads for like all the different sets of moves you can have for these, then we're going to get very good at one-looking very quickly. So yeah, that was how to be sub X at Pyraminx. The reason I'm not doing anything kind of past sub 3, like the reason I'm not doing a sub 2.5, is because I'm not there yet. Like, I average sub 3, but if I did a how to be sub 2.5 section, that would just be me guessing or kind of going off what other people have said. Everything in this video I've kind of done myself and have kind of proven to myself works to get past that time barrier. So if I didn't want to do anything kind of past that and kind of guess at what you should do to get sub 2.5. you know, I kind of tried to make this as kind of applicable to as many people as possible. Obviously, some people are kind of more naturally gifted at Pyraminx, so they are going to have a faster progression. Obviously, some people might have a slow progression. It just kind of depends on, you know, how naturally gifted you are. But like, generally, I think the majority of people will follow the kind of progression and have the times that I kind of described in the video when they're focusing on these things. So yeah, thanks for watching. You know, if you have any questions or anything, put it in the comments. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed.